Welcome to Pickle Lane. I'm Josh.
And I'm Erin. And apparently, we have a lot to say.
I lived with chronic illness for years and then finally healed using a technology called Bioenergetics.
Through that experience, we co-founded a holistic wellness brand called Rudy.
We've learned a lot, to say the least, and we want to share it with you.
We'll explore mindfulness, wellness, and spirituality.
Topics ranging from pooping out parasites to breathwork and even traveling to parallel universes.
We spent a lot of years not living authentic to ourselves.
So our hope for Pickle Lane is to help you find your freedom and pick your own lane in life.
Tune in to a new episode of the Pickle Lane podcast every Friday on Spotify or Apple Podcasts.
And subscribe and review if you haven't already.
We hope the show resonates and we can't wait to connect.
Welcome to Pickle Lane.
Hi, everybody.
What it do, baby boo?
Happy Tuesday.
Damn
Tuesday
it.
again.
The hell is wrong with us?
Listen, it all revolves around childcare.
Oh my goodness. In-laws, maybe think about being available on something outside of a Tuesday.
Listen, you need to stop hating on Tuesday. Tuesday's a fine day.
It's just a slug.
Wow, hurtful.
It is what it is.
How are you on this Tuesday?
Nope. What's lighting you up today?
Oh, what's
Get
lighting me up?
out of here, dude. We had a whole conversation about this.
True, it's true. Okay, what's lighting me up today is that we started our day with a 5-mile walk. It was 65 degrees, blue skies.
There we go, talking about the weather.
No, but this is different.
But it hit. It slapped
Yeah.
us all over the face.
It was glorious. We talked the
So
whole
good.
time. It was great. So I guess
You're great.
what you can do when you don't have a
When your
5-year-old
in-laws are
in-
watching your daughter on a
tow.
Tuesday.
They're going to the state fair, so that's cute. Yeah. What's lighting you up today?
Dude.
Still your answer, sorry.
You totally did. I had that one on deck too. Is there something in my teeth? You keep looking at my teeth.
You just have beautiful teeth.
Thanks.
I'm admiring them.
Something that lights me up, dude, this freaking Salt and Stone deodorant has got me a high right now.
I know.
We are not sponsored
This
by
is
them
not an
yet.
ad, but I'm going to manifest that collaboration.
Damn, do we smell good?
I will never wear perfume again. This
Wow.
deodorant smells so good.
I wouldn't go that far, but
I just
we smell good.
keep getting whiffs of myself. Like I'll raise my arm to fix my hair and be like, who is she? Usually I really avoid my armpits because
Yeah.
I've always worn, at least for the last 5 or 10 years, natural deodorant.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm just going to be honest, the stuff doesn't work usually. Like,
Yeah, this one's hitting.
I
I usually
know.
used Hawthorne, still great,
yeah,
but it's not a dry deodorant.
it's like a gel.
Yeah, it's like a gel. And so like my armpits would get weird.
Kind of like gooey.
Yeah.
Ew,
And it didn't like help with sweat at all.
Sure.
It just masked the BO until noon.
Yeah, reapply.
But this one,
know.
Salt and Stone, tap into our DMs.
This shows what like a nerd I am with nothing better to do, but I've already texted multiple people being like, yo, you got to buy this deodorant.
It's so good. So that is lighting me up because I'm sitting down here being like, damn, we smell
I know.
good.
What scent are you using?
The one
The
that
Santal
Yep.
and something.
Vetiver
Vetiver. Yeah. And then I'm using the other two and they're just lovely.
at the same time.
No, I alternate.
That's why. That's why you love it.
Speaking of smells, on our 5-mile walk this morning, Josh loves to give compliments, and it's like one of my favorite things about you. We were on a walk, and this woman was in front of us.
Our pace was like, we were like speed walking.
Yeah, for sure.
So we were coming up on this old lady pretty quick.
Yeah, but apparently she had a nice odor.
Yeah, she was for
to
sure wearing
Josh.
perfume.
Yeah, so when we passed her, he was like, you smell great.
I
And
said, you smell lovely.
she looked at him like, what the fuck?
I had no idea how to receive that. I'm probably the first person in 15 years that's told her that.
That's taken the time to sniff her and say, you smell
Well,
lovely.
we were downwind. Y'all, she was wearing like a blue floral shirt with blue capris
She was
and
cute.
white and blue tennis shoes.
Yeah.
She was enjoying her walk, but we
She
were
was.
downwind and I could smell her perfume. Not my style,
Sure.
but if you're going to put that much perfume on,
You better get a
I'm
compliment.
going to compliment you. So I said, you smell lovely today.
You actually had to say it twice because I think the first time
Totally
she
caught
was like,
off
there's
guard.
no way he's talking to me.
He wasn't talking to me. That young man wasn't talking to me. He was talking to the woman that was right next to him.
Yeah.
Nope. I was talking to you, my lady.
So you made direct eye contact and said, you smell lovely today.
Yep. And she was like, you can smell me from behind? And I was like,
Jeez.
yes. And it smelled good. It's a compliment. Receive it.
Anyway.
It was great.
Yeah, it was pretty good.
So smells clearly light me up.
They do.
This book that we're still reading, it's great. The interesting piece about all of this is I felt like I figured this out over an extended period of time on my own, maybe the
Yes.
hard way.
Maybe. but
Classic Josh.
you learn by doing, which is
Fact.
very much your learning style, which is why school didn't work for you. It's why
Yes.
you've literally started a million businesses because
Yes.
that was business school for you.
Yep.
And I think the same thing is true for all the spirituality stuff, is like you just try things.
Yeah.
You experiment, you find what works or what doesn't work. And now all these books that we're reading, you're like, wait, I did that intuitively.
I do this.
Yeah.
Wait, that's in my meditation.
Yes.
Wait, like I built out this meditation, right? And I have all these I ams, and the entire book's like, say I am.
Yeah,
And
all
I'm
the
like,
I
I do
ams,
this.
all those I am statements, the universe like has to abide by.
Yes.
Is what we're learning. And so when you were healing and you were saying I am
Healed.
all the things, the universe had to abide.
It worked.
And it's like you have to say it with full conviction, I think, is the
and
trick.
over time you convince your brain.
Yeah, repetition is key. And so that's what you
100%.
did. How long do you think you spent doing like affirmations or mantras?
In hours?
Yeah, like maybe break it down per day. What would it average to when you were at your peak?
Oh my goodness. Hours.
Hours a day? Really?
yeah.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
Was all of that in like meditative states, or was it just
In the
throughout
morning
day
it
you were
was
always-
meditative
Okay.
states, and then every time I heard an airplane go over.
I love that.
Do you?
That's sorry. Okay, that was
just
a little
got
weird.
Really sentimental. Aww.
Okay,
Cutie
rewind.
pie. Nope, I'm leaving that in. I edit this
Damn it.
podcast.
Okay, go on. That did feel weird.
Yep, it did. I was like, and then like, do you have a sentimental piece with airplanes?
I do actually.
We live semi close to a private airport, so like propeller planes and things like that'll fly over. And so every time I heard it, I would do affirmations.
I think because when we moved here and when we moved into this house, first of all, we bought this house on FaceTime from out of state, which was terrifying.
Yep.
Meaning when we first saw the inside of the house, like in person, we were signing papers to take the keys.
Yeah.
And there was no going back at that point. After that day, we came back we were going to redo the floors and do a couple things. And the place reeked of cigarette smoke. Like it smelled like people had been smoking inside for years.
Because she did.
Yeah. Not the people before us, but generations ago. And then there was also a gas leak in the back yard that was going to be like thousands of dollars. Anyway, there was all these things that made me feel wildly anxious. And what the fuck did we just do?
Yeah.
Oh, and then another thing was that airplanes kept flying over our house. It was like every 10 minutes. And I was like, oh no, that's going to be so disruptive. I hate that. But over time, that became a thing for me too, where I was like, okay, every time I hear an airplane, it's going to remind me to be present and grateful.
I don't even hear them anymore.
Yeah, me either. Yeah. They just blend in. But yeah, that's why I went, oh yeah, I used to do that. Sorry, go on.
So now everyone knows. Thank you for that. Anyways, it's been fun to read that and be like, oh, I do that. I had to maybe learn it the hard way, but now you're learning it because you learn via books.
I love a syllabus. I love a teacher. I love a test.
Yep.
All those things. All the things that you don't.
So it's fun seeing you have like aha moments.
Yeah.
You're like, oh my gosh, highlight. Oh my gosh, highlight. Oh my gosh, highlight. And I'm reading being like, this is hysterical.
All of my spirituality books, Power of Now, Untethered Soul, this new one, Happy Pocket Full of Money, probably 60% of the words in the books are highlighted. That's how like much they're blowing my mind. Yeah, there you go.
Put them into practice.
Yep, that's the hard part. So what are we talking about today? Blatch.
We're talking about the bitch of a disease called Lyme. Womp womp.
And first and foremost, can we all just take a moment to know that it is Lyme, not
without an S.
Not limes.
It is just Lyme. From a tick or any blood-sucking insect. Lyme, not limes.
We repeat, Lyme, not limes.
Actually, just in the past month, multiple people in person and in my DMs, limes.
Limes. I know very smart doctors who call it limes.
But I assure you,
drives me bonkers.
Drives me donkers. Keeping that one in too. Lyme disease. That's what we're talking about today. I feel like, we're pretty knowledgeable about the topic.
Josh has some lived experience.
And you have some book experience.
Yes. We've both learned a lot. I wouldn't say I'm an expert, but I know more than I did 3 years ago. That's for sure.
And you may have Lyme, but your body's doing okay with it. Yeah. So here we are.
We'll talk about that. Yeah.
So where do we want to start?
First, I think not everybody is familiar with Lyme. If you have heard of Lyme, you probably have heard of it in relation to like the bullseye rash if you get a tick bite. And yes, that is something that can happen.
25% only.
Yes. So there's lots of myths about Lyme disease. First, let me just say, so Lyme is the most prevalent tick-borne or vector-borne is another word for that I say vector-borne because we are finding now that it's not just ticks. It can also be carried by mosquitoes.
Spiders.
Yes.
Blood-sucking insects.
Yes, biting insects.
Blood-sucking.
Blood-sucking. But these, I don't think spiders. I think, take that out. I don't think that's true.
Spiders don't suck your blood?
I don't think so. They give you venom.
Oh.
But
See, I'm learning.
You are.
Wow. I'm keeping that in.
There you go.
So
Yeah.
it's
to my
not
knowledge,
all blood-sucking insects. It's insects that exchange a bite for saliva in your bloodstream.
Yeah. I don't know. I'm not an insect-like person.
Keep going in this.
Okay.
Are you still here, guys?
Okay. This is going great. So it's the most prevalent, most common vector-borne illness in the United States. And it is caused by a bacteria called Borrelia burgdorferi. And it
Sounds like Harry Potter.
It does. All of the Lyme and co-infections to me sound like Harry Potter spells.
Not sponsored by them.
By Harry Potter? Yeah, there's Borrelia burgdorferi, there's Bartonella, Babesia, Anaplasma, Ehrlichia, Rickettsia. They all have a magic spell to them.
It's like Italian.
Sort of. But it is transmitted via tick or mosquitoes, or we're also learning that it can be transmitted in utero, like from mom to baby. I think we're
another blood-sucking
the biggest parasite of all. But I think we're hearing more about it because there's been some celebrities with Lyme, and it's just coming more to...
It's finally being talked about more.
Yes, because it's so prevalent. I should have looked at the numbers, but hundreds of thousands. Yeah. And there's reasons for that. Many, some of which are... First of all, we know that it's not just ticks anymore. It can be mosquitoes, which of course are everywhere. Historically, it was thought that Lyme is really only in the Northeast, so Connecticut and Vermont and areas like that. But these ticks, these deer ticks that carry Lyme and co-infections, which may be started there, but they can be carried on like the specific species of songbird, I think, that migrates. And so as these birds fly, they then drop these ticks. And so now they're everywhere. They're in 49 of 50 states at this point.
What's the 50th?
Hawaii. So we're moving there.
No way. Are you serious?
Yeah,
There's
course.
no Lyme?
There's no Lyme to date. I'm sure at some point it will happen. But
holy shit.
Yeah.
What are we doing?
I know. Let's all move to Hawaii. But yeah, so it's everywhere now. It's not just in the Northeast. There's lots of other myths about Lyme, which we'll get into here in just a bit. But in its acute form, it will cause things like fever, fatigue, myalgias like aches and pains. Migrating joint pain is the hallmark symptom of Lyme. We know that if Lyme is not treated or adequately treated, which happens most, if not all the time, because again, we'll get there in just a bit, but it can then really impact like the nervous system, the heart, the joints. Borrelia is like this kind of corkscrew shape, and it likes to burrow into connective tissue. So it can really affect joints, connective tissue, cartilage, things like that. But it's very skilled at evading both our immune system and antibiotics. And that's the conventional treatment. Is if you go, first of all, if you're lucky enough to even be told that you might have Lyme, if you have...
Typically from a bullseye rash, which is only 25% of people that get bit.
Exactly. And also...
I never saw a bullseye rash.
No, but...
I've never even seen a tick on me.
Yeah, and bullseye rashes, first of all, they don't always look exactly like a bullseye. So it could be an atypical presentation, like more of a splotchy looking thing. It doesn't always look like a perfect target, which I don't know if you remember, but you've had lots of bites.
For sure.
That have crazy reactions.
Yeah. Throughout my life, I had those. Yeah.
Yes. So that I do think is related. I don't know that they were bullseye rash per se, but
right.
Another thing is that often people, like the scalp is a really common place to get a tick bite. And so you're not going to necessarily, if you've got hair, see a bullseye rash there.
Well, that makes one of us.
Yeah, we would have seen it on Josh.
Yep.
But yeah, it's estimated now that only a third or less of people that develop Lyme do get the bullseye rash. So it's really not a good diagnostic indicator at all. Yet you will still find doctors who are adamant that if you don't have a bullseye rash, there's no way you have Lyme.
So they're 25% right.
There's no way you have Lyme, actually, is what they probably would say.
Yeah. You actually don't have Lymes.
Yeah. So it's a very poorly understood disease process in our experience. You have to find what is called like a Lyme literate doctor to get any decent care in the conventional world for Lyme, which is really unfortunate because 9 out of 10 times those people are not covered by insurance, super expensive. And even then you don't always get to the root cause of things. It just depends on the doctor. But I want to talk more about your experience and then I'll chime in with the nerdy stuff. But back in, when was that? 2017,
2016
June,
was my first
July.
symptoms. 2017
Okay.
is when I tanked.
And often, not always, just depending on the person and what's going on, Lyme can present in summer months just because that's when ticks are thriving.
Mine did.
Yes. So talk to us about that first, I don't know if you remember, back when good old doctor,
Yep.
not to be named, diagnosed you with costochondritis and like on from there.
Yeah. It was summer around July where I started to have some more prevalent symptoms. But the months before that, it started to gradually occur where I had shortness of breath, which was weird. I was very healthy, very athletic. I was a personal trainer right before I got sick. So the shortness of breath was weird. I'd run up the steps and I'd be like, why did that wipe me out? Then I started to have weird joint and muscle pain, which we thought was DOMS, delayed onset muscle soreness, where I was like, maybe I'm working out way too much because I was pushing my body on CrossFit and I was working out multiple times a day. So I was like, maybe I need to back off on that because I'm overusing my body. Then my chest started to hurt. That chest pain was weird. It didn't feel muscular and it didn't feel like I had pulled something doing any type of yard work or workouts or anything like that. When I went to the doctor, he was like, yep, this is costochondritis. And I was like, oh, sweet. Thankfully, it's not anything worse.
And
Newsflash, wasn't.
For that, he prescribed high-dose
High-dose ibuprofen and rest.
I believe at the time you were also starting to get those night sweats really bad, like probably 3 to 5 times a week.
The night sweats got so bad, I'd literally soak through the sheets and through my outfit, like my shirt or whatever.
You'd have to change in the middle of
I was
the night.
having to wear shirts to catch the sweat because it was soaking through the freaking mattress.
Yeah.
And I would have to have 2 separate outfits next to my bed because it would happen multiple times in a night.
Yeah.
Waking up drenched, like you could wring out the t-shirt, my boxers, everything.
Yeah. So for that, the doctor wanted to get a chest x-ray to make sure you didn't have tuberculosis, which I appreciate. I guess that's a good thing to rule out. But hindsight, all of this can and was eventually explained by Lyme and co-infections.
Yeah.
The shortness of breath is like classic babesia, that like air hunger feeling where you can't get a full breath, or
which we'll talk about co-infections in other episodes.
Yeah, we're going to focus more on just Borrelia on Lyme today, but it is good to know that Lyme pretty much never is going to show up on its own. There's always going to be some frenemies involved, and there's a lot of them, so we can devote another episode to those. But yeah, those are the starting places for you.
Yeah, this was before we knew anything about holistic medicine at all.
Yeah, we were health conscious.
Yeah, but nothing more than that. We were heavily in the westernized space, so that's all we knew where to look. We did blood work on me, and my testosterone was through the roof and my liver enzymes were high. I got a phone call from the doctor telling me to lay off the partying on the weekends and maybe consider skipping some doses of testosterone. Meanwhile, I had probably lost 20, 25 pounds at that point, was literally skin and bone, and had zero energy, which was probably the next biggest symptom. My energy plummeted.
Yeah.
And it was difficult to even stay awake or get out of bed. Then the nerve pain came. And then there's all these snowball effects that happen, but then you're not getting answers. People are telling you it's all in your head. And then the anxiety just went through the roof, which was probably a catch-22 because I know anxiety comes with Lyme, but then you aren't getting any answers. So then you're like, what is wrong with me? Like my body is literally attacking itself.
Yeah.
And that's when my body turned into my enemy, which wasn't what the right mindset. My body was just working really hard and giving me signals to focus on it. And then it just tanked from there.
Yeah, the shooting pain was wild. We would try to describe it to our doctor, and he was like, I guess we could send you to a
And it wasn't like somebody pinched me. It was like somebody was pulling on my nerves. So it wasn't like somebody flicked my ankle or flicked my arm. And it would just be at random every second of the day. So it'd be like in my ear, and then in my arm, and then in my chest, and in my stomach, and in my leg, and then in my face. It just would go all over the place. It was wild.
Yeah. And probably like classic Lyme, like what most people think about, is more so joint pain, migrating joint pain. One day it might be an elbow, the next might be a knee, the next might be your hip, then your ankle, whatever. But it's really important to understand that Lyme, it's known as the great imitator or the great mimicker for a lot of reasons. The symptoms can be so vast and so confusing depending on the person, depending on the kind of whatever toxic sludge you've got rolling around in there. Oftentimes we see people with Lyme also have some degree of mold illness or inability to metabolize or clear out mold, whether that's a genetic predisposition or definitely like lifestyle wise? Again, you said you were working out a ton. I know this is when you were just starting your new business and you
Yeah, there's
guys
a lot
were
of stress.
slammed. And you've always been a very like kind of balls to the wall kind of a guy. So
Yeah.
I think that probably left you somewhat vulnerable as well. But it can look so different depending on the person, depending on your variety of toxic sludge that's rolling around.
What seems to be a common denominator across everyone that we're seeing with Lyme and even my story is that it ends up being mystery symptoms that don't go away. So,
Yes, chronic mystery illness.
yeah,
And often what happens then, if we would have pursued other diagnoses, we would have gotten all those rule out diagnoses, such as probably fibromyalgia was in your future.
we had talked about it with the
Yeah,
doctor.
probably chronic fatigue syndrome was in your future.
Mhm.
There was a point where you were having lots of weakness in one side of your body. So I
Yeah.
was a little bit nervous that MS was going to be a
Yeah.
diagnosis that we would accumulate. It's just all these mystery symptoms that don't often make a whole lot of sense. So if
Yeah.
that sounds familiar, if that's something that you're dealing with, definitely look into Lyme and co-infections and or mold illness.
The tough part about that, even with Lyme literate doctors, is that there's multiple variants of Lyme that exist and only a few of them are tested. So I was tested for Lyme 3, 4, 5 times, also expensive, and they would all come back negative, every single one of them.
Which, let me talk really quick about the conventional testing for Lyme because it's bogus. So traditional, what you would get if you went to any old doctor and asked for a Lyme test, you would get the ELISA, which is like a kind of a screening, and or then the Western blot is the gold standard. And we know now that those two tests have a less than 50% accuracy rate when it comes to diagnosing Lyme, which is just great. Why don't we just flip a coin instead? It's awful. There are more sensitive testing options now through like functional and Lyme literate doctors that they test for a lot more markers or bands of Lyme and co-infections, which can be for sure more accurate. But at the time, we had none of that knowledge. And so we just kept getting the screening, like that ELISA and or Western blot. I don't think we even got to the Western blot. Yeah.
And then they'd look at us crazy and we'd ask them to test all of these different types of things, Lyme being one of them. And they would reluctantly scan for it, but it was the same test every single time. So it would come back negative.
Yeah. So just know less than 50% isn't a great option. Like I would pursue other routes. We, of course, were drawn to bioenergetics, and that is the route we went because I wasn't eager to get a diagnosis per se. Like that wasn't the most important thing to me. The most important thing to me was for you to get well.
Yeah.
I do understand some people really want a diagnosis because for insurance
definitely helps
purposes.
the person that's sick.
Yeah.
That's for sure. It makes you feel significantly less crazy. When Lyme finally came back on the results, it was just like an exhale because it was like, okay, I know that I'm starting to get better and stuff, but now this makes so much more sense. And so many people have told you that it's in your head.
Yeah.
That over time you're like, is this in my head?
Yeah.
Like maybe I am just batshit crazy. Having something that you can be like, yeah, I have Lyme, or yeah, I'm working through mold or whatever, just is a huge piece of the healing equation because you can identify it. Now, making it become your identity is where it gets really unhealthy. But initially, it's just the biggest exhale.
And I think for us, again, if we would have pursued the conventional diagnosis, I'm sure we could have gotten there after $15,000 more and 5 more months and et cetera. We were content with the answers we were getting via bioenergetic testing, even though that's not diagnostic information. It was plenty for us to get rolling.
Yeah.
But just keep in mind, and this is not me trying to dissuade anyone from pursuing like a Lyme literate doctor. I think they can be super helpful for people, especially with really complex cases. But I talk with so many people who even working with a Lyme literate doctor, even getting the Lyme diagnosis, there are still points along the journey where you will feel gaslit and you'll feel like, okay, I had this diagnosis, but then I got this test back and now I'm like, is it even Lyme? And so I just don't put all your eggs in that basket, I guess is what I want to say.
The other thing with Lyme literate doctors, which all meaning well and there's no malintent, but like we talk about all the time, there's bioindividuality in how you need to heal. And so you may have the exact same Lyme as I do, and that doctor is going to prescribe the exact same protocol because that's what he or she has seen work in the past for the majority of his or her patients. It may work for you, but you're going to go through hell because it's not the sequence of healing in the chronological order that your body wanted.
Potentially, yeah.
Which I found that out the hard way doing a metal detox prior to attacking different foundational pieces. I was in a panic attack for 2 months straight.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's not that the doctor is intending for you to go through hell. It's just all that doctor knows based on the data that they've worked with in the past. So having that bioindividuality, which we prefer to use bioenergetics, hence why we started Rudy, allows you to get a really specific protocol for your body and your body only and begin to do long-term healing. The other thing that I see with some Lyme literate doctors is you're going to get relief pretty darn fast. That's the whole goal when you're in SOS. But the long term is really difficult until you get to the ultimate root causes of everything. So yeah, Lyme came up, 3 or 4 scans in for me, super impactful. And I started to attack it really quick. There were so many things after that came that probably caused my body to be in SOS before I even got Lyme. EBV, strep, herpes, the list goes on, mold. A Lyme literate doctor, if they're not taking into consideration all the other root causes that may potentially be keeping your immune system preoccupied, you're not going to heal all the way.
Totally. And Lyme will always be a marathon, not a sprint. There's just absolutely no way to clear Lyme and co-infections quickly or overnight.
Yeah.
And the conventional treatment, like especially if if you have an acute Lyme infection, Borrelia infection, likely you will get 2 to 8, maybe 12 weeks of antibiotics. For some people, that's enough. For the majority, it's enough to suppress it, if that makes sense. So like you'll feel better, but there's research out of Harvard, recent research that shows that Borrelia within 72 hours is able to be antibiotic resistant. So
crazy.
So you're getting these week-long protocols of antibiotics, and within 3 days, Lyme's like, fuck you.
Yeah, that's insane.
I know. So that's why I always really loved like the herbal homeopathic route. We're able to tweak it, switch it up, and really prime your body to do the work. Because at the end of the day, you can get bit by a tick and get Lyme and get really sick because your body has areas of vulnerability. And that's maybe not for everybody. Maybe you're perfectly healthy and you get smacked by Lyme. I think that's also can happen. But more often, I think there's a vulnerability that exists. Like you said, your immune system is distracted by X, Y, and Z. We're living in a chronic state of stress. We're eating the standard American diet. We're not sleeping. We have other infections that are dormant or latent that can and will replicate when they're able to. And so Lyme is less so a Borrelia problem. It's more so an immune system problem. And if you're not addressing that piece, if you're just smacking it with antibiotics over and over again, you are actually setting yourself up for more vulnerability because we're sending that Borrelia deeper and deeper. It's getting smarter along the way. It's learning how to resist those antibiotics and also your immune system then. And you're fucking with your microbiome along the way. You're like, let's kill all the bacteria, even the good stuff. And we know that our immune system lives in our gut. So taking 4 months of antibiotics is going to cause some issues there.
Sure.
Now, that's not to say it's bad for everyone. I think people do heal with antibiotics with Lyme. So I don't want to like dissuade people from doing that if it feels aligned for you. But for us, it just wasn't an option. So
we were way too far gone for that.
Yeah. Even the few weeks of high dose ibuprofen, I remember being like really uncomfy with. Just knowing that any treatment that is suppressing a symptom or just suppressing a microbe or a pathogen without addressing the root cause or the vulnerability that set you up for that infection in the first place, it's not treatment. Like that is a temporary treatment. It's not going to address the underlying root causes.
Yeah.
Okay, so you were having shooting nerve pain, anxiety, insomnia, night sweats.
The list goes on.
Yeah.
It's infinite. It felt like every single week a new symptom was coming and hard.
Yeah.
It wasn't like, oh, my back's starting to hurt. All of a sudden I wake up and have 50 knots visible all over my back. I'd be like, what the hell is that? And then all of a sudden the next week I'd wake up and there'd be shooting nerve pain down my legs and I couldn't stand up. And then next week I was so fatigued that I couldn't take a shower. I was taking rag baths because for some reason the shower was causing me to go into like a spiral and I'd be out for 3 days. Then all of a sudden foods were bothering me. Everything I ate was bothering. It just was
often feeling like you were about to pass out at any given
Oh,
moment.
it was terrible.
Vertigo would set in. The world would be spinning.
Yep.
Yeah.
It was gnarly.
It really was. Do you remember?
Panic attacks for days.
I was just going to say, do you remember the Uber ride that you had to take?
So there's one time. So my anxiety was through the roof. Erin's a nurse. She's working night shift. So I was alone at night. She was like 12-hour shifts.
Yeah.
So I'd like obviously be anxious for her to leave. I would have insomnia. So from like 2 to 4 a.m., I was awake every single night, guaranteed. So then I'd be up alone with my thoughts and symptoms while she's working in the NICU or whatever. One night I wake up in a complete anxiety attack, like full out anxiety attack. Because I have nerve pain, shooting down my left arm and my chest is killing me. Obviously, I'm having palpitations. So I'm like, shit, I'm having a heart attack. This is it. I'm having a heart attack. And I'm texting Erin being like, I'm about to die. I'm about to have a heart attack. And she's like, did you take GABA? Which really helped me during anxiety. Are you like trying to calm yourself down? I'm like, I'm having an anxiety attack, but I'm also having a heart attack right now. And we only had one car at the time. Erin had it at the hospital.
Where you needed to be.
Yeah. Erin was like, go to the ER. And I'm like, I'm not calling 911 to go to the ER. Like, I'm having a heart attack. I'd be dead anyways.
But it's the middle of the night, so you can't like ask a neighbor to drive you.
Yeah, it's literally 2 a.m. So I call an Uber. The dude picks me up. We're driving and he has no idea that I think I'm having a heart attack or that I'm in an anxiety attack. And he was like, can I sing for you? And it's 2 a.m., y'all. 2 a.m. The dude starts blasting country music and is belting these lyrics at the top of his lungs, knowing he's taking me to the ER.
I wonder what he thought.
He didn't even ask me. He wasn't like, is everything okay? I just got in and he's like, you okay if I sing? And I was like, okay.
It's probably the best thing for you at the time.
Yeah, I definitely calmed down.
Yeah,
that was hysterical. Honestly, I just needed a human.
Yeah.
I just needed somebody to be like, okay, I'm safe now.
Did you ever watch Touched by an Angel growing up?
Totally.
That was your
him.
angel.
Yep. Spirit guide right there in the flesh.
Do you remember what song?
Oh, it was Sheryl Crow.
Oh,
yeah. It was just like song after song of Sheryl Crow. Interestingly enough, Sheryl Crow has Lyme.
No way.
Yeah.
It was for sure an angel.
Holy shit. That's crazy. My whole body's in chills right now. So, yep, I took an Uber to the ER thinking I was having a heart attack. Erin met me at the hospital because she worked in the children's hospital right next door. Yeah. So we get there. They shave off 2 spots on my chest, slap something on, and my heart is fine, y'all.
Classic Lyme.
Classic.
You go to the doctor and you're like, look, I have XYZ symptoms, more like ABCDEFG, HIJKLMNOP symptoms, and they'll get labs. First of all, can we talk about labs for a second? Sorry, I'm interjecting.
Go for it.
I think people need to understand how the quote normal lab values are derived. I think that's very important to understand. So what all that is, it's not clinically or research backed necessarily. It is just an average of all people aged like 18 to 50 something. I don't know. It's just the average. And so that's what we call normal.
Healthy, quote unquote.
Quote unquote, fine is what they say. But that value, like that range that they consider, quote, fine, is always changing because humanity is getting, at least in the US, our health is declining rapidly. Yeah. So like those values are not fine anyway. But even when you're outside of the quote fine, like when it shows up red on your lab results, at least for us, 8 out of 10 times when that happened, they'd be like, I wouldn't worry about it.
I think you have mental issues.
It's in your head.
Yeah.
Like,
lay off the testosterone. You're 22 years old. I think you're fine.
Which I still need to look into why most of your labs I've gone back just out of curiosity and been like, oh, that's why that was there. And that's why that, like your liver enzymes, like not surprised at all.
Yeah.
I think your white blood cell count was off at one point. Not surprised at all.
Yeah.
Which, just for people listening, if you do have a white blood cell count that is either below 5, that would suggest a chronic infection of some sort. So sometimes that is poo-pooed. Don't poo-poo that. And then if it's greater than 8, that's suggestive that there's like an acute active infection. So anyway, just something to keep in mind.
Noted.
But the testosterone one, I never went back and really looked into why that would have been the case.
I've seen a couple of Lyme forums about it, talking about testosterone being high in guys. I think it's not talked about a lot with guys, is I think ultimately what it is. So I think a lot of the outspoken Lymies or anybody in the chronic illness space aren't men.
They're all women.
Yeah. So testosterone is going to look different and not going to be talked about. But multiple forums that I've read and connected with guys that have Lyme also have had high testosterone.
Weird. Okay, I want to look into that. Why? Because in my brain, I'm like, I feel like it would be low testosterone because your body's under so much stress. But
another random one talked to me a little bit about, because you were literally just telling me about this. If you can't see me right now, I have tattoos everywhere. I did when I got Lyme. Interestingly enough, I would get sick close to around the times I would get tattoos. And when I would get tattoos, I wouldn't get like one, I'd get like a sleeve or something like that. I always go big. Anyways, when I would get really sick, especially when we'd get into the colder months, who knows why, my tattoos would raise.
yeah, they
Tell
would.
me a little bit about that.
The ink would puff up and
Yeah,
be
it'd
like,
be like 3D.
a 3D tattoo.
Yeah.
Personally, I think it's an immune system thing because at the same time, every single bug bite you would get would be like enormous.
Yeah.
It would like grow, or it would almost look like cellulitis. Like you would
Sure.
get, remember you'd get those red streaks from bites.
Yep.
I think your immune system was just over and underperforming.
Yeah. But it would be
In the
old
wrong ways.
and new tattoos.
Yeah.
It wouldn't just be like my brand new tattoos. My old tattoos would raise.
Yeah. And they'd be kind of itchy, right?
Not itchy. You just notice that.
Okay.
I think because they were raised.
Yeah.
You'd like rub against stuff.
Sure. I also think hindsight, maybe we love tattoos. I wish I could be covered in them, but now I feel like I know too much and I don't really want to get a bunch of them. But not all ink is created equal. A lot of tattoo ink has obviously like heavy metals and other things in it.
Yeah.
So I do think it was your immune system just reacting to all the toxins. Good times. But yeah, your tattoos have not been raised
since I healed.
Yeah.
Yeah, years.
Yeah, that was a weird one. I'm trying to think of other just bizarre symptoms that you would complain of that we had no answers for at the time that now we're like, oh.
I think it's irrelevant because I had so many other things working against me too. It wasn't just Lyme. It was co-infections, mold, strep. EBV was really hard for me to work through when I was healing. Herpes, mold. Did I say mold?
You did say mold.
Did I say EBV? EBV. Strep. Did I say strep? Strep sucked.
Yeah.
So yeah. And then I also didn't have foundational detoxification. So everything was just all up and around, which is why when I did the heavy metal detox, I essentially just unearthed things that had been sitting in me for decades and it had nowhere to go except for an anxiety attack.
Especially with liver markers like you had, I can't remember exactly where your enzymes were at, but they were elevated, which shows stress in the liver. I read recently like 1 in 3 or something adults has fatty liver right now, which is insane. Like that statistic is terrifying for the United States, but it is very prevalent now to have an underperforming or stressed liver because there's just so many toxins.
Castor oil, that shit.
Yeah, we love castor oil. But there are, I mean, I think there's like over 150,000 plus, and that number is always increasing every day. Chemicals that are in our environment that our liver is forced to process.
Yeah.
So there's that. So even if you're eating like perfect, clean, organic, etc., there's some things that are just unavoidable because we live where we live.
We're alive.
Yeah. The vast majority of people who are eating even like a healthy version of the standard American diet.
Yeah.
I mean, our food just has crap in it. It has chemicals, it has preservatives, all of these things which our liver has to process. So we're just asking our livers to do more than ever before and they're struggling.
They're bogged down.
Yeah. And so when that happens, your liver cells literally turn into like fatty cells, like fat globules. And then those cells are no longer functioning liver cells. And if that's not addressed, it eventually turns to like cirrhosis, which is irreversible.
How does this have to do with Lyme?
Because it's clogging that drainage funnel. So the liver and the colon are kind of your two biggest ways that your body removes toxins and excretes them out. So if that major drainage pathway is clogged, if your liver is not functioning because it's fatty, then you're going to hold on to a lot more toxins. And over time, that bucket is going to overflow and you're going to have all the many symptoms.
Yeah, that's interesting.
And just leave you more vulnerable to like if and when you are exposed to Borrelia from a tick or mosquito or whatever, you're just more at risk of developing chronic illness from that.
Yeah. Recently, the CDC came out with a study, and maybe it was just a statement, essentially saying that there's a specific tick that's causing people to have the inability to process red meat.
Alpha-gal.
Can you talk a little bit about that? What the hell that is and why? Who knows why the CDC is talking about this now? Back that up. More and more people are talking about it. So this is good. I don't even care if it's with malintent at this point. At least people are talking about tick-borne illness.
Yeah.
The New York Times just came out with a post that highlighted 3 or 4 people with chronic illness. Most of them had Lyme in some way, shape, or form, and were sharing their stories. So it is good that these things are coming out and starting to be talked about. I know a lot of people in the holistic community are kind of poo-pooing it or even just utilizing it to build more fear mongering and maybe even calling CDC worse than what they are or whatever. But people are starting to talk about this now. And the fact that the CDC is even bringing this up means that we have a really big problem. And even if it's has something to do with something else that we don't know, who gives a shit? Tick-borne illnesses are being talked about right now, and it's prevalent throughout the United States. Everyone now probably knows somebody that has been diagnosed with Lyme disease, regardless of if they're chronically ill or not. But can you talk a little bit about what the CDC came out with?
Yeah, I've definitely noticed more people talking about Lyme and co-infections too, which is really cool. And I get the frustration from like the holistic and functional medicine community against the CDC and other institutions.
Because it hasn't been helpful thus far.
It hasn't. The dismissiveness, the like overlooking of this huge epidemic, really. I mean, I think we're about to find out in the next 5 to 10 years, like how much this is really impacting people.
We're seeing it in Rudy.
Yeah, but even I have to wonder. Of course, this is not like a research-backed claim, but just from your experience and from all the people that I've seen now with Lyme and co-infections who are able to heal and yet have been given diagnoses like MS, ALS, Alzheimer's, like all these things. You have to wonder with the way that Lyme attacks nerves and the nervous system. It just makes so much sense to me that it could be at play in a lot of these diagnoses. But the information, when you talk to most doctors, or if you were to look at information from like the CDC and things like that, it almost feels deceitful, or it's a little fishy, if I'm being honest. There are certain diagnoses. It's just so interesting to me that, so Lyme, chronic Lyme in particular is one of them. Not so much acute Lyme. I think people are in all backgrounds can get on board with acute Lyme, but chronic Lyme is one. Pandas is another one. Pediatric autoimmune neuropsychiatric disorders associated with strep. That's a mouthful. But these disorders, unless you're going to a person who really specializes and has done a lot of research in these things, the rest of them, it's like they get their guards up. I don't know. At least that was our experience. It's like you mention it and they're like, nope, never. That doesn't exist. That's not a credible diagnosis or whatever.
Sure.
When you have doctors and other practitioners finding and providing real help and healing to people, it's like, why can't we get on board with these things that are clearly issues in the community? So I get the backlash against the CDC. I don't necessarily care to be a part of it, but I understand the frustration.
Yeah.
But what you're talking about, alpha-gal, is a sugar. It's found in meat. You think like red meat is what I at least think about. And I'm certainly not an expert in alpha-gal syndrome. It can be very serious, can be life-threatening. But when people, once they're bit by this tick, if they have this syndrome, they just essentially don't tolerate any red meat or sometimes even dairy products and things like that because it has this sugar in it and their immune system attacks that. So again, it's just another immune system dysfunction.
Just another symptom with tick-borne illnesses.
Yeah. Okay. But that's enough nerdy stuff for me. I want to hear more about your experience because I think that's what people really resonate with at the end of the day. If we had heard a story like yours before or during we were experiencing that, I think it would have been hugely helpful and probably maybe shortened our journey a smidge.
Yeah.
So we talked about some of the symptoms. Let's talk a little bit about, because we know, like I mentioned, Lyme really loves the nervous system, the brain. Talk me through like the sort of psychiatric side of things. What were some of the mental health issues that presented with Lyme?
It's a roller coaster. The doctor visits that we would have would focus on that. They would be like, are you depressed? Be like, yeah. Do you have anxiety? Yeah. It's definitely in your head after the list of symptoms that we would give them. So it started to get draining when we probably went to 10 different doctors and everyone was giving me the same answer over and over and over. You go do your own research, which also isn't helpful. Google isn't going to be super resourceful. At least it wasn't, 7 years ago.
If you look up chest pain and left arm pain.
Yeah, it didn't help. So the mental side started to get really taxing. You start to second guess yourself, and then you get so weary of playing the guessing game.
Yeah.
And we did that for 7 years of just possibly having hope of being like, maybe this is it. And then getting really sick again and crushing that hope. And then you'd even see a functional doctor who was literate and blank, and you'd think, oh, maybe this is it. And they would hyper focus on this and they would make you spend thousands of dollars. And you had so much hope that you would just spend those thousands of dollars only to end up getting sicker and sicker. It got to the point where I would have really, really dark thoughts, to the point of suicidal thoughts and ideations, because I had lost all hope. I know at the beginning, it probably was more exclusively Lyme symptoms, but then it was just a snowball effect because my immune system and my toxic bucket were just completely overloaded. I'm sure many other toxins were then either activating or reactivating inside of my system, and it was just symptom after symptom. The mental side of it was probably, for me, one of the more difficult symptoms that existed inside of my chronic illness journey. I have a really high pain tolerance. I also can push my body to the limit. Like in workouts and CrossFit, I loved CrossFit because I would literally push myself until my body couldn't go anymore. Maybe one of the reasons I got sick, but I could tolerate a lot of that. Did I get weary of it and tired of it? Absolutely. But I could push through nerve pain. I could push through, you can't push through mental illness, and it just exists. And so you can't be like, stop being anxious. It doesn't work that way.
You can't think yourself out of disordered thinking.
100%. So like when I would have nerve pain or even fatigue and I'd be like, I need to take a shower, fuck it, I would go take a shower and push through it and maybe reap the consequences after, but I could push through it. When you're in a full out panic attack or fully depressed, you can't just pop out of that or push through it. It doesn't work that way. That's when I really got into the mindfulness game, which my body was still in SOS when I started to get into mindfulness. I just knew I needed to calm down my nervous system.
Yeah, it was like an intuitive, you just were like, I think I need to listen to calm music and meditate like once an hour and see what happens.
Yeah. So recently I've been talking to people with that regard. I know I'm more rigid and I know I don't do anything half-ass. I know that's my personality, but these things help. I would do meditation as soon as I woke up. I had decreased all negativity in my life. I would
Meaning like media forms?
Oh yeah, we wouldn't watch scary or negative movies. I wasn't even listening to like rap or hip hop, which was my jam before. And I was just eliminating all negative energy that existed all around me. Stopped hanging out with certain people. Like I went all out with it. Another thing that I would do, even during work hours, every hour on the hour for 10 minutes, I would literally just lay on the floor with my eyes closed, listening to, I don't know what kind of music.
Binaural beats or something, probably.
Yeah, just instrumental.
Yeah.
I started to see a difference. I started to see my nervous system calming down. I would still have these symptoms, but I wasn't fully in an anxiety attack at all times. I also started to recognize the power of my mind, how I was talking to myself, the things I was considering. When I would get really, really sick, the suicidal thoughts would come in the darkest times, and it always would. But the more I worked on the mindfulness, the more I felt like I had tools to combat the deep, dark thoughts. It would bring me out of it. Mindfulness in this for sure changed my life, but you have to take into consideration that there are physiological things working against you. And so, yeah, my mindfulness game was pretty on when I'd be sick. Then I'd get lackadaisical and get off of it. And then I'd get sick again and be back in my mindfulness, but it wasn't taking it away. I just felt like I had a little bit more of a toolbox to not necessarily defeat it, just counter it with something positive. So it wasn't until I started fully healing through bioenergetics did I start to notice my anxiety disappear and my depression or even negative thoughts, and my social ability started to increase and things like that. So it takes time to get to that point. I could pinpoint certain toxins that I was taking care of, Borrelia being one of them, where once I was done with my Borrelia series therapy, which is just a homeopathic protocol that comes up inside of remedies, I noticed 50% of my anxiety was gone.
Yeah.
I was like, what the fuck?
Yeah.
I literally in a week was like anxious and then not.
Yeah.
It was crazy.
Was there ever a time, because I remember it being it just seemed so obvious to me that your mental health stuff was all a symptom.
Yeah.
Because you had so many symptoms. I'm like, of course, that's just another symptom. You never struggled before that.
I barely had negative thoughts.
You were so positive to a fault. But I'm curious to know, because there is definitely like psychiatric family history within your family. Was there ever a time where you thought maybe this is in my head?
Absolutely.
Really?
Oh, I mean, quickly into the journey, I had multiple occasions where I was convinced that I was just creating these symptoms.
Wow.
Yeah. And no offense, but it felt like you thought that too.
Really?
Yeah. So many doctors, we were like fully integrated into the westernized medicine. You were working at a hospital as a nurse. We had never considered anything outside of westernized medicine. We hadn't had to, thankfully. But when that started happening, and then every westernized doctor was telling me that it was all in my head, we were combative of it. We were like, no, this can't be.
Right.
10 in. You never told it to me, but it felt that way, where you were starting to believe that maybe we don't have any answers. Everything looks normal on your labs outside your testosterone and liver. EBV and Lyme are coming back negative. What else can it be but in your head? It's kind of what it felt like.
We talk about repetition being so important with the I am statements, but it goes the other way too. If you hear it from 10, 20, 30 people, that there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with you, there's nothing wrong with you, you're going to start to think there's nothing wrong with me, even though deep within, I think both of us, we may have faltered or questioned along the way, but I was like, there is no way, like all of this.
The tough part about Lyme too is there's flare-ups.
Yeah.
So it's not like you're constant years and years and years in. You'll be sick for 6 to 8 months, and then all of a sudden you'll have like a random couple months where you feel semi back to normal. No rhyme or reason. I mean, I'm sure there is scientifically, but in my brain, there's no rhyme or reason. And then you plummet and get sick again. So then you're like, yeah, it was a really good season. It was spring and we were coming out of winter. Everyone was doing really well. Business is great. I'm not as stressed. Is this in my head? And then things would happen where the heat would come and I'd be super discontent and work would be crazy and all these things. And then I'd tank. So then it would start to be like, maybe I am controlling all of these symptoms.
Do you think you contributed?
Well, it didn't help.
Sure.
That's for sure. I mean, adding stress and even I don't do well in high humidity at baseline. All of these things, I was pushing myself in workouts. Those things weren't helping.
Sure.
I also wasn't on a mindfulness game or anything like that. But I think flare-ups come and go based on your toxic load. And if you're not super conscious about that, it's not going to matter anyways, because your odds are high that your detoxification isn't on par either. So you have so many things working against you that odds are high you're just going to go into flare-ups anyways. Maybe they were more severe because of the certain scenarios that I was in. The worst one that I had was in COVID.
Yeah.
And I was freaking the shit out because I was sick at baseline. So getting COVID felt like a death trap to me.
Yeah.
For sure. I was stressed. I was anxious. I was worried. I had already pretty much gone into a flare-up at that time. I felt like I was destined for death.
I remember because I, at the time, was working at a children's hospital and I worked in what's known as the float pool. So I would just go wherever I was needed within the hospital every time I worked. And so, of course, when COVID happened, we basically just made these makeshift COVID units on whatever floor we could. And of course, the float pool was going to staff those units. And so I pretty much exclusively worked in a COVID unit that entire time. And every time I would get home, Josh would make me like change in the garage. Like I would just come in the house naked and then like take a shower immediately. He's like, keep that COVID out of here. Yeah. But yeah, I mean, it definitely was scary that time.
Yeah. I was so sick at the time that I thought anything added on to my immune system wasn't going to go over well.
Yeah. And you kept asking me, you're like, am I immunosuppressed like with Lyme?
Yeah. Because people were telling me that.
I would always reassure you that like, no, you're fine. You're fine. From a lab work perspective, you're not immunosuppressed per se. Like your white count and your, ANC and stuff like that was in a fine range, but quote fine.
Yeah.
But realistically speaking though, what happens with chronic Lyme, it does turn into more of an autoimmune presentation. And so to some degree, you can be immunosuppressed. And some people are more so than others. Of course, it just depends on the person and the scenario. But I was just trying to keep your anxiety as low 100%. As possible.
The other difficult piece in all of that too is it felt like nobody was listening to me.
Yeah, especially during COVID. It was just like alarm bells everywhere.
Not even COVID. My entire chronic illness. Yeah. Even functional medicine doctors, we were spending $500 to $600 per 30-minute sessions.
Yeah.
Not on top of every single time they would tell me to take a new supplement that cost another $150 to $200.
Yeah.
We were spending thousands of dollars a month on my health and I wasn't getting better. And it just felt like nobody was listening to me.
Yeah.
They would hyper focus on something that rang in their mind based on a symptom that I said and was like, oh, it must be adrenal fatigue or it must be in your brain or whatever. So it got to the point where it felt like even you being an advocate, nobody was fucking listening.
Yeah.
It made me hopeless. It made me feel like the system was broken and that nobody actually cared because I wasn't quote unquote treatable. And nobody had the time, nor do I necessarily blame them because everyone's fucking sick, but nobody had the time to take to figure out what it would have been without me spending 10 to 50 grand in a matter of a few months to just be a test subject for a doctor willing to take the time.
Yeah.
So if you're sick right now and doctors are saying that, I'll believe you. I
Yeah.
like, regardless of if it's in your head or not, like those symptoms are real. They're happening. You're experiencing them. I will be your advocate. I will listen to you and be there for you because it got really lonely. Even my friends were like not fully believing it. I knew they weren't because sometimes they'd only see me with no symptoms.
Right.
So yeah, Lyme's an asshole.
It sure is.
Real quick, just so even for me, you say it's a corkscrew. Is it a parasite?
It's a bacteria.
Bacteria. Okay.
And what can happen is when it gets to that chronic state, so when it's past the acute infection, if it's able to get past your immune system, it will burrow deep within your body and it likes certain areas of the body. So the heart is one place. Some people can get Lyme associated carditis, I believe.
Sure.
It also loves the brain and the nervous system. So that's when we see symptoms like weakness, nerve pain, anxiety, brain fog is a big one, or like memory loss. Like people will all of a sudden feel like they can't remember their address.
Fact.
Or it's
that happened
crazy.
to me a lot. Y'all, we'll talk about co-infections because honestly, a lot of my symptoms that I got relief from going through healing were from working through co-infections, actually.
Yeah. Babesia, Bartonella, those are really common ones.
Yeah.
And they can wreak a lot of havoc on the body for sure. But Borrelia in particular will burrow into whether it's heart, brain, or connective tissue. So collagen, joints, a lot of times we'll see like arthritic symptoms, but lots of pain. Some people also develop another kind of nervous system symptom can be that really intense, meaning like fibromyalgia pain, where it's like even the very light touch of your clothes
weirdest feeling
makes you want to scream.
Yep.
And so that is very confusing, of course, like what is going on? And then of course fatigue and just all those like low energy symptoms.
In layman's terms, for Lyme, let me just give it to you in layman's terms. That bacteria is a bitch. That's it.
Yep.
Borrelia
is a bitch.
Yep. We hate it.
We hate it.
It's the worst. But Rudy saving life. Bioenergetics for the win.
Bioenergetics for the win. And I know we talk about this a lot, but Lyme has a way of reaching the soul.
For sure. Yep.
I think about the transformation that we've been through in the last 3 to 5 years.
Yeah.
You would not be the person you are today.
Absolutely not.
Without Lyme. This has brought depths to you that you
I
did
feel
not
like
have.
I'm tapped into something that's completely outside of myself.
Yeah, for sure. I know we talked a lot about like the psychological symptoms. Was there something aside from bioenergetics, of course, we've talked a lot about that and its role in your healing. Was there something that you feel like clicked along the way that switched you from being like hopeless to hopeful? Or was there
inside the healing journey?
Yeah.
The healing journey is also not a walk in the park. I think some people don't understand that when they're signing up to heal. And a lot of times when you're in flare-ups and then you're not, you're like, why do I need to heal? I'm not sick anymore. And then a flare-up comes. That was me too. In order to heal, sometimes you're going to have to go through your darkest days that you have had in order to get to the other side because your body's going to work. As you're going through that, you start to find yourself being more and more resilient because you're getting stronger and stronger. There are some rounds, specifically if you're utilizing bioenergetics, where it's going to be hell. And then you'll come out of it and be like, whoa, I don't have this symptom anymore.
It's like a little light.
And you're almost waiting for the symptom to come and it never does. Sensitivities change or the anxiety was hands down one of the biggest.
Yeah.
Where all of a sudden, not all of a sudden, I gradually noticed my anxiety. During my healing, there were points where I couldn't lift my head up. I remember eating dinner with my head literally on the table.
Yeah.
Light sensitivity or sound. I would literally, after work, have to just go lay in a dark room because Zoe talking would set me off. And she wasn't even doing anything. She was just talking loud and or music or anything. All of a sudden, none of that bothered me. And then it got to the point where I was maybe, 7 scans in where something monumental happened where I remember my brain turning back on. But when I was done with that round, I had no anxiety, gone. And even thinking about it didn't make me anxious because what would happen is I wouldn't have anxiety, but then I'd think about having anxiety and then I'd have anxiety thinking about anxiety where now I could talk about anxiety and be with somebody with anxiety and I'm not going to get anxious. I don't feel it at all. That's when I was like, oh shit, something's working here. And I think I'm beating this. Depression wasn't one that I struggled with as much as anxiety. Anxiety was just terrible. But then I would notice that my nerve pain was gone and things like that. When that started to happen, I think I dove deeper into everything else outside of chronic illness. Sure, there was the community that helped me through that, but I started to recognize there was so much more out there in the world.
Like from a spiritual perspective?
Everything,
Yeah.
mindfulness, spirituality. I know I've said this before, and I know it may be like something that many won't receive, but for me, chronic illness, I think this was like fucking past lives or parallel lives or passed down from generation to generation. And I needed this to wake up.
It was like a cosmic wake-up call.
Yep.
Yeah.
This was my Kundalini awakening.
Yeah.
It was the only way that my consciousness was going to wake up how it needed to wake up. It happened over time of me recognizing that Lyme and the style of healing that we chose, aka Rudy, required to have a level of open-mindedness that didn't exist before I was sick.
Yeah.
So many people were telling me it was this or that or this or that. And it made me realize that there was so much closed-mindedness in the medical space, let alone the world. And I started to have to just be okay with whatever came my way.
Mhm.
Open-mindedness, like I don't care how somebody heals. I'm totally open to it.
Mhm.
And I don't care how people find relief, totally open to it. Bioenergetics work for me and we see it working for hundreds of other people right now, but that doesn't mean that it's what you need
Sure.
to heal. And I'm totally open to that and ready to celebrate that if that's what is your freedom. That when I started to be able to say that kind of thing with religion and then spirituality and even mindfulness and how people are approaching life and just being totally open to anything, that was, I think, when I shifted.
Yeah. You like loosened your grip on life a little bit.
Yeah, that was part of the breathwork session, I think, too.
Yeah.
But my mind had to get there in order for that breathwork session to happen, in my opinion. Sure, I was doing breathwork sessions over and over, and there was progress, but I think it was the experience of chronic illness and then going through the healing process and talking to people and just choosing to be more open-minded towards literally everything that allowed me to get to the breathwork session that released my grip. I got a download, yada, yada, yada.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, there's a lot to take in this podcast. I know we literally wanted to just talk about Lyme, which for the most part we did. Lyme is intense.
It's intense and it like reaches every part of a person. So we can't just talk about the bacteria.
Yeah. And honestly, anybody that's suffering with chronic illness, period, meaning a symptom that either can't be diagnosed or a symptom that may be diagnosed but can't get rid of, it's impacting not only you, but everyone around you. It's a ripple effect the opposite way too. As soon as you start to heal, people start to notice and it's a ripple effect too. So I encourage you not to give up. I encourage you to continue to have hope. If you lose hope, literally just text me because I am a walking example that you can beat chronic illness because I was literally planning to end my life. And not because my mind got so dark, I didn't want to live the way I was living. It felt purposeless.
Yeah.
Here I am, fully alive and healed.
Yeah.
So
I think the first, really, truly, the first step toward healing, if you do nothing else, work on that belief that you can and actually already are healing. Because without that, your subconscious is just going to keep sabotaging left and right. And whether or not you're aware of that, like I think that happened often with us. Like we both had this subconscious, is this working? Like
it's for sure.
We had to just, no questions, you're healing.
You have to choose.
If you're not quite there yet, if you can't say, okay, I'm healing, at least get to the point where you can say, I can heal. That's great starting point.
Yeah.
And if you need evidence of that, just listen to all the other podcasts of Josh talking about how it's possible.
And if you want some bioenergetics, I know this great company called Rudy. And if you go listen to the episode part 2 of Bioenergetics, I'm pretty sure there's a code in there that you can use to get a discount.
Yes. Yeah, we would love to work with you, help you find healing. Yeah.
And at a minimum, celebrate you because you deserve it.
Yes.
I don't care where you're at in your journey. Yep. You're resilient. You're strong. You're powerful. You're a badass motherfucker. Anyways,
love
this was
you
a
guys.
good one. Hopefully you learned something.
Yeah.
If not, you did. I know you learned something.
Ending these are always so tough for me.
I love it. Erin, I'm going to say you cringe. You don't even know what to do.
It's the same way in every conversation. Like, so how do we end this? Love you guys.
Love you too, boo.
Love you too, boo.
Bye.
Bye.